the people of sake actually brought me into sake.
Back in 1988, this place was actually in Ginza on the main drag.
At first it was kind of soy sauce, it was miso.
To the point where it actually changed my life.
New Year's Day 1989.
Not just sake as a beverage, but all the culture and history and...
Welcome back once again to another episode of Sake on Air, broadcasting as almost always from the Japan Sake and Shochu Information Center here in Tokyo. Just a short hop, skip, and a jump from Tokyo Station. We are back with the entire crew, and it's 2019. We've actually released an episode already in 2019, but this is the first time we're all sitting down and recording for 2019. So this is an entirely new deal. It feels like a fresh start. And in another rare happening, we got the whole team in the office today. We have everybody. I, as always, am Justin Potts. And next to me and all around me, let's go around the table. If everybody wants to introduce themselves. To my left, we have
John Gauntner.
John, nice to have you on again.
Pleasure to be back.
It's been a little while since we've been sitting here.
I guess it has, hasn't it?
This
Sorry
is good.
about that.
No problem. This is the way the world works. I was like, we're all back together. Band's back together for 2019. And next to John, we have
Chris Hughes.
Chris. I feel like I see you a lot.
Yeah.
For one reason or another. We're crossing paths. This doesn't feel quite so fresh. On around the other side, we have the other Christopher.
The little Chris, yes.
The little Chris. Would you prefer to be the little Chris?
I'm fine with
The little Chris. Okay, done. Simplified for our listeners. Little Chris. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good. I just saw you last week.
This is true. This is true.
Chewing on mics quite a bit recently.
This is true. That means there's a lot coming for 2019.
You don't have anything to chew on there.
And last, I said, yeah, we're a little jerry-rigged today here. We're kind of we have to always be trying to figure out something new every time.
First 5 mic episode.
Right? This is going to be the first, possibly the last after this. We'll find out. And certainly last but not least, right next to me is
Sebastien Lemoine.
Sebastian. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Good to see you.
You have a good holiday?
Yeah, excellent. Actually, quiet ones in Japan. I ventured outside the sake world, visited the Hakushu distillery. These
Nice.
kind of things.
Nice. Did you get what everybody in the world is lusting after?
Oh, but my clients desperately wanted to find some bottles. But
Yeah.
Everyone's disappointed coming to Japan because you can't find the bottles here.
Yeah, I said that. Why don't we have that problem in the sake? There's more than enough sake around. We just got to turn all those whiskey people into sake lovers somehow.
Well, I guess it may happen soon.
Right? And shochu lovers. Maybe that's an easier sell. Anyway, so being as it is 2019, we wanted to take an opportunity to reflect a little bit, look back at 2018, actually. We're going to do a little year in review episode. Everybody on the panel today has done a little time trip. We've done our own little time trips independently and kind of thought about what happened last year, what sort of defined the year. And then at the end of the episode, I think we're going to get into a little bit, what do we expect for 2019 as well? Some of that based on some of those things that happened in 2018 and maybe some other surprises as well based on some of our own work and insights. And so without further ado, let's dig into it because we've got a whole lot. And so who do we start with? Where should we start? Sebastian, do you feel like starting?
Let's go.
Let's go. What do you have? What left an impression on you in 2018?
Well, what left an impression with me is the new projects in sake brewing. And I'm thinking of projects overseas, either foreign investors doing sake brewing projects overseas or Japanese money starting new sake brewing projects overseas. Of course, I'm referring to the Dojima brewery opening, which we mentioned, I think, in an earlier episode. I mean, that's good. That's interesting for the future of sake. And we can discuss that later. And I'm thinking of projects in Japan which involve foreign expertise and sometimes people coming from outside the sake world. And I have 2 in mind. It happens that they're with the same Japanese brewer, Masuizumi in Toyama. But I'm thinking of this new product released by Shivas and Masuizumi, which is a local sake aged in whiskey casks. And again, that's something we will probably expand on, private labels and where does that lead us. And another one is a greenfield project, which has been announced and everyone's waiting for details. that is the project of the former chef de cave of Dom Pérignon, Richard Geoffroy, another Frenchman, which wants to do a premium sake, a really premium sake, and other themes.
It'll be interesting. As you said, everybody's still kind of waiting to hear exactly the details and the extent of what that project is going to look like, and sort of how he defines that value and what they decide to build together is going to be very, very interesting to see, because that could be a really big game changer. I don't think it's not going to come to fruition this year. Is it going to? It's a little further out, right?
What I heard is 2019 to start construction, but of course the first sake will not come out before
for
2020, I suppose. But the CEO has been identified and comes from the wine world. So it's making progress, definitely.
I'm personally very, very eager to see where that one goes. How about you there, Christopher? Well, as we're stepping outside the world of just Nihonshu, just sake, we jump to champagne, and now we'll jump to shochu, aomori. What do you got?
Something that's been building for a couple of years, and it was certainly on display again in 2018, and that was this new, really exciting passion for Shinshu, which is, a lot of shochu distilleries are putting out very, very interesting, obviously incredibly young, practically unaged shochu. They're having festivals at the distillery to celebrate these things, and this is, I think it's a really fun new wrinkle, the way that the distilleries are displaying their products, and they're showing what the entire distilling season could have in store. It's a nice change. The bottles are a little bit different, a little bit fresher. They tend to have a sash on the neck that shows that they're an early season entrant, and there's a lot of fun stuff out there.
Being relatively new and being Shinshu, I imagine not a lot of that stuff is getting overseas at the moment. So that's something you got to travel to our island for.
Yes, you would need to
at
make
this
it
point
over
in time
here for the most part. And actually, to be fair, a lot of it doesn't even make it this far. The really really interesting, funky stuff tends to stay very local. And yeah, I'm a fan, but it's also because I'm a proponent of older school flavors and profiles and stuff that's not quite as popular these days, doesn't sell quite as well. I like the old school is the best school, I feel, in some ways. So that's one thing. I don't know, are we going one at a time, or?
Yeah, that works. It's interesting because you see that, I think, across Japan, not just with shochu, you see it with sake, you see it with wine, you see a lot of stuff. This trend toward freshness, clarity. And sake, I think you're starting to see that shift a little bit. You're starting to see people looking for a little bit more complexity. You're starting to see smaller, at least at this point, niche markets start to pop up, but not just with beverage, but with food and everything as well, too, whether it's rice, whether it's, all these other things.
Right.
The Shinmai, this year's
we had
rice crop.
Morocco,
earlier and earlier there.
Morocco boom, didn't we, here in Japan? Or we still probably do have a bit of a Morocco boom. A lot of sake aficionados tend to prefer the Morocco style sake, where you get more complexity, from the kind of the off flavors and things that John's theoretically you should kind of get more complexity. The idea of finding the sake with charcoal is you strip away this complexity by stripping away these off flavors. That's what it does. But I still see a desire for this type of Morocco sake, and obviously Shinshu is normal Morocco, isn't it? It's that sake world.
And this is the season.
Indeed it is.
Yeah.
So on that subject, sort of complexity, we've seen a lot more Camuto, it seems like, this year.
There's been a huge boom of Camuto this year. Actually, for the past couple of years, but this past year is when I actually really noticed it. Everybody and his brother's got a Camuto.
Why is that, John, you think?
Well, one of the things that I thought was a major theme this year, something that I saw a lot, was not only Camuto, but people moving back to yeast number 7 and number 9. There's a very, very quick explanation. Those are more traditional flavors and aromas and less wild and aromatic, more focused, more balanced. You could still bring out aroma with number 7 and 9 for sure, but it takes a bit more brewing skill. And so I think what we had is a kickback. In other words, we had a whole bunch of brewers going nuts with all kinds of new styles and new kinds of yeasts. And the younger brewers who themselves started these trends are now questioning themselves. Well, all right, I wouldn't say questioning themselves. I would say, are now saying, wait a minute, I actually kind of like this Camuto style, don't I? I actually kind of like yeast number 7, number 9, don't I? And they say, you know what? They were drinking the same kind of sake for 800 years for a reason, weren't they? And they start to dabble with more traditional styles like Camuto and more traditional yeasts like number 7 and number 9, and they find out that they like what they've created in doing that. So that's what I think is happening.
7 is the standard, isn't it? In sort of.
I'm sure more 7's used than anything else in the country.
Yeah,
but
No, I want to say it's about 60% of the products on the market or something like
Yeah,
that.
there's 7. There's 7s that they don't get from the Jozo Kyoka anymore. So when you throw all that in together,
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a lot
significant.
of 7.
Yeah, and I said, and actually, this has been kind of a bit of an ongoing theme throughout, I think, the episodes and stuff as well too, is that you're starting to see, especially that younger generation, revisiting, for lack of a better word, how to create product with sake with more authenticity, whether that's the right word or not. But I think, right, you're seeing this in wine. You're seeing a lot of these other things, whether it's in the natural wine movement, these other things, positive, negative, good, bad aside, people are looking for, why should I care? And is this the real deal? And so in looking at that, a lot of those yeasts, Camuto as well too, as a style, it's become kind of a catchphrase or a piece of vocabulary that people can latch onto. This so this is it's a buzzword,
Right.
absolutely.
For the brewers, I think it's about becoming more in touch with the brewing process itself. I heard this from a young brewer the other day in Saitama Prefecture, Kanbai, Shuzo, and his kind of concept behind using, it's not Camuto, it's the futa koji, the really like small container, hard work version of making koji. Well, it's hard work, but this is really hard work and labor intensive. And the reason he does that, goes out of his way to do that, is because he's got to be more hands-on with the sake process, and it kind of spiritually makes him feel more devotion and love, imparts more love into the process. And of course, the idea in Japan, in behind all brewing, is that you somehow pass that love, that devotion down to the drinker. And that's always been, a massive part of brewing here in Japan. I think that's a massive motivation behind this.
I'm very sure that the personality of the brewer gets conveyed in the final sake.
Definitely.
Yeah, hands down. I said, when we're talking about the terroir, that's definitely the individual and the people involved there. That's going to be a big, significant part of it. And that's, yeah.
Go ahead. Well, I was going to go back to Camuto for a
Yeah,
second.
I was going to as well. Shoot.
Well, I was just going to say that a lot of people that are listening may wonder, well, what's up with this Camuto stuff? And often Camuto has a more fine-grained acidity, maybe even a bit tart and a little bit of a different flavor profile. But that's not the only reason that I think that some brewers make Camuto. I think a lot of brewers make it because the yeast starter is just stronger.
Yeah.
The cells have thicker
That's what
walls.
they're-
They'll tolerate higher alcohol contents. It's just a more robust fermentation. So I think a lot of brewers will use the Camuto method just because it's a more solid method in terms of overall brewing.
I read that it's used to make dry sake normally, actually. I read that traditionally the Camuto method was used to make dry sake because it creates a more powerful fermentation, allows you to ferment for longer, and it's much easier to create dry sake.
Yeah, so it generally results in a drier sake. And that's what
Right.
you're starting to see. This is super niche kind of here in Japan, but this concept of fully fermented sake. And you're starting to see this sort of niche sort of products and places sort of specializing in things like that. A lot of these dry, a little more tangy types of sake. As I said, these Camuto tends to be a little less fruit, a little more cereal, a little more nutty. The thing that's exciting about it as well too is I think people are they're re-examining depth and relationship with food. We've got a food sake episode coming out quite soon where we dig into that a little bit. There's also, as you're saying, a lot of these younger brewers, this is stuff that they haven't had the opportunity to really experiment with, and so in order to pass this stuff on, there are tojis who have never really done Camuto right now, or have never, had to do that. And so it's a opportunity
They had people above them saying, "Oh no, you don't make Camuto.
Yeah.
You don't make Camuto. Not at this stage in your brewing life. You don't just go straight into Camuto." But those people have kind of passed on now. They're not there. They don't pressure them anymore, and they've got the freedom to kind of go. I'm not saying that's the only reason, but they got the freedom to kind of go. Oh, let's challenge something here. Let's challenge something new. Let's try and do this Camuto thing, and they find new ways to do it. Right.
It's kind of back to John, kind of what you were saying is how the end product tends to be a more stable product in a way. I'm trying to think what the best word is for it.
I think Sokujo creates a more stable sake.
Well, so that's the thing. It's kind of interesting. So I think Camuto, you're going to have more challenge getting consistency because of the nature of the fermentation, but the end product you're going to get tends to be a more stable is not the word I'm looking for. I think you used the word earlier, or something very close to what I was looking for.
I don't recall what I said.
Consistent, maybe? Consistent?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
know what you're
Well,
getting.
I know a very robust. Is that the word?
Robust?
Yeah.
The fermentation, I think, is more robust.
Yeah.
I think the final product tends to have a bit more sharp acidity, a bit more lactic acid for sure, and a lot more umami.
Yeah.
And there's actual technical reasons for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily think the resulting sake is any less stable. I could be wrong.
No, it's not. It's not stable. Sorry, I'm looking for the right word and I'm not finding it. It's not stable as far as consistency. It's
only one part of the process, right? So everything that follows after.
Yeah.
a lot
exactly.
exactly.
There's
A lot of
other
stuff
things after
that goes through that more full fermentation will possibly, there's a better chance that it will keep better, that will stay better,
Well,
that
I
will
think the
stand
yeast,
up to
the
more
yeast to what? The yeast not petering out?
time. Yeah, is part
Oh,
of it.
time
is
in the bottle?
time in bottle after it's a product, after it's out. At
Well,
the same
actually, there's
time,
more reasons for that that are interesting. And again, you guys are in
Yeah.
this rabbit hole right now.
Yeah. we can.
Once you touch that word, Komodo.
Yeah.
I think the yeasts that are typically used in Camuto are not the more aromatic yeasts.
No.
And the more aromatic yeasts do not tend to stand up to time in the bottle as well as the sevens and
especially
nines.
after being opened and transportation.
They,
and
were,
things
they,
like
were,
that as
they
well.
were ambient back in the day, weren't they? They were just using ambient yeast to start off the Komodo. And
A long time ago.
Yeah, and now it's only now that they add an actual proprietary
And so
yeast
now
to
it's
it.
actually getting confusing because you're seeing both.
Right, that is getting
You
confusing.
very rarely see naturally occurring yeast, though.
No.
4 or 5 places.
Yeah, they're
To my
popping
knowledge.
up. They're popping up more and more. But what's interesting, what I sort of put down is with Camuto, is at the same time I'm seeing more. I don't know how to describe it, but Camuto-free Camuto. So it's everybody feels like they need to make a Camuto, but especially maybe a lot of larger producers, they doesn't. As far as what a lot of the people that niche market that's looking for a Camuto style, it's not quite that far out. It's still within.
Are you talking about the final flavor profile?
It's final flavor profile, exactly. Yeah,
right,
It's
right.
it's more. It's very much in the ballpark of what that producer is already producing. However,
I see.
it's Camuto on the label. I'm starting
I
to see
So
both.
they're just leveraging it as a marketing technique.
Yeah, you're seeing both.
Yeah.
You're seeing small producers that don't have a lot of product. They're trying to figure out a way to get into that niche market, and so they're creating something really intense that maybe isn't always fully fleshed out, but they're getting out there. And then at the same time, you're seeing the other end of the spectrum where it's you. Unless somebody told you, you probably wouldn't know.
But that's valid. I
Yeah,
think that's something we
absolutely.
need to
I
be
think it's
careful
completely
about.
valid.
You can't tell people that Yamaha and
Absolutely.
Kimoto always are
No,
a baseball
Agreed.
bat upside the head.
Yeah,
And
no.
Agreed.
sometimes, if they didn't tell you it was Yamaha or Kimoto, you wouldn't know.
Exactly.
I was told
Yeah,
that.
it wasn't a value judgment. It was just
Right.
interesting to see that because
People are jumping on the Kimoto bandwagon.
and you're starting to see different interpretations of it.
I was told that Komodo and Yamaha,
Which is, I
should
think, really
technically-
exciting.
I was told by a brewer that Komodo and Yamaha should be the same. At some point they became different things, but Komodo and Yamaha are made exactly the same, apart from one difference, obviously. But Komodo and Yamaha should come out the same, and the fact
Technically.
that they don't anymore is just
That's
down
another
to-
rabbit hole.
It is another.
We
rabbit
We should
hole.
do it. We should do a Yamaha.
I just
a
want to
Yamaha
say,
Kimoto.
brewing has become rather sadistic. I think
Sadistic?
The people are actually kind of going out of their way to make it harder for them.
I think
Oh,
they
absolutely. I
always
mean,
have.
the consumer, not just in sake, but in beer
Yeah.
and everything, the
Yeah.
more pain, lack of sleep,
Yeah.
blood, sweat, tears, not every other bodily fluid, but as much duress as is
Ideally.
possible. I mean, the
Yeah.
consumer's going to love it. There's
Yeah.
there's more of a story to tell. So yeah, I mean, sake
It's a good
certainly,
story.
yeah,
That's that
it's
craft
in that basket.
God, well, then the Nihonshu world, we're primed for this. We've been doing this for centuries.
yeah,
This craft beer, guys, these are just getting caught
Just
up. We've been
getting
doing this for
back to
centuries.
basics, isn't it?
Yeah.
We own this market.
Well, there is a beer that's made like a Yamaha called a lembic beer, and it's made very, very similarly to
Lembic?
Kimoto.
Lembics are Belgian.
It uses the
Belgian style.
bacteria in
Yeah.
the air, and I'm not sure it's the same bacteria, but
Yeah, we should do a beer
Yeah.
a beer
beer versus
sake
sake.
show in
Yeah.
comparisons. That would be worthwhile. What else we got? What else happened this year?
There were 2 things that I thought were really interesting on top of that. One of them there's a national new sake tasting competition, the Zenkoku Shinshu Kampyokai, which is basically a competition of every brewer in Japan. They can submit 1 sake per brewing license that they have to a blind tasting that the government used to run, and now the industry kind of runs. And it's been running since 1911, I believe. So it's the longest competition of its kind in the world. It's very, very difficult to win, and it's very difficult to win 2 in a row, and even more difficult to win 3 in a row. So the record stood at 13 in a row for a long, 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 long time. And then 2 years ago, 2 breweries, one is called Takashi Mizu, which is in Akita, the other is called Kogane Zawa, which is in Miyagi. They both set the new record by winning 14. Both of them, together in the same year, won their 14th gold in a row. Then, this year, they won their 15th in a row.
Wow.
And to
Both
me,
of
that's, both of them. They both won their 15th in a row. So to me, they found the rhythm of making something so flawless, yet still standing out in character. I can get the attention of all the judges and win another gold. So to me, it's pretty much a contest that's only really recognized within the industry. But it's really, really a very, very cool accomplishment of mine. That's something else that happened this year.
Do you think that their sake, I mean, the sake that they send to the Kampyokai is representative of what they do in general? I mean,
No,
you
the
visited
sake
them?
that they make for the competition is just for that competition. So you could say, what's the point, right? However, what that shows is great control over the processes. In other words, you have to make this just perfectly. You've got to second guess the judges, and you can have no flaws, and it's still got to stand out. To me, that must show great, incredible control over your processes. On top of that, if their market sake is good sake, you've got your hands on a really good brewery there. And for both of them, that's the case. Takashimizu is much larger, but they're actually an outstanding brewery. And Koganezawa is a much smaller brewery, but they've always been interesting and more craft dosed, I think.
Can I ask a question about the 215-year-in-a-row winners? Okay, those brands, champion brands, the gold medals, can you buy those anywhere? Can you
So typically
taste them
speaking,
anywhere?
a brewer will make a little bit of sake just for the contest. It's not made for the market. A small brewer might just take their daiginjo and ship it.
Okay.
Right? If they just whatever, throw it on the wall. If it sticks, great.
Mm-hmm.
But most brewers will make at least one tank for just the contest. A large brewer will have the capacity and the wherewithal to make several tanks and take the best of the best of the best of the best and ship it to the contest.
Gotcha.
So some brewers will sell that product as a gold-winning sake later. Some will not. Some will just blend it in with the rest of their daiginjo.
Oh.
There's business decisions. Can they do it? Sure they can. But then you got to relabel stuff, have a new product.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Right.
For some, it's like, nah, forget it. Just mix it in with the rest of the daiginjo. Others will make a big deal out of it and ship it. I think it depends on what they have, how much they have, and how much hassle they want to deal with in doing that. Furthermore, when they do it, they'll make it in the most extravagant, labor-intensive methods you can, and they'll basically do a pressing, which is probably going to be a drip pressing, into, depending on how much they make, 40 or 50 18-liter bottles. Then they'll taste each one of the 18-liter bottles and send the best of the best of the best of the best of the best to that contest. Then they'll blend the rest of the 18-liter bottles and ship that to you at your house, if they choose to make a market out of it,
Wow.
a product out of it.
All right.
So what you're tasting won't be exactly what went to the contest,
Gotcha.
but it'll be pretty close.
Yeah.
Tobin, yeah.
Tobindori.
Yeah. Probably the decision to do this also how much confidence they have that they can bring that product to the consumer in a quality state where it will, right? Because it being
peaks
a
at
gold
about
medal,
0.3 seconds, and then
it's-
that's over.
right? I said it's a very delicate
Yeah.
sake, right? And so to sell that as the gold medal top winner, and then
Yeah.
it also has to be representative of that. And so it's even though if the stuff in the bottle is that level of quality, if you don't have some sort of system in place to get that to the consumer in a good state, it's also somewhat risky as well too. I feel like from a
It's not really
communication
for
sort of market
drinking either. I always
No.
feel these sake are not really for enjoying with food or drinking. They're just kind of, have
They're
one
daiginjo
sip
on
and
steroids.
see 'em- Yeah,
Is it?
yeah,
pretty much.
Yeah.
yeah. We do
Yeah,
need more.
it doesn't go well with
We do
food.
need more competitions actually where they're actually sake are being entered
Market
that are
sake.
actually market sake. We definitely need more of those. Not just in Japan, mainly in Japan obviously, where we're getting sake being recognized that's good for pairing with food or drinking more than one glass or more
Yeah.
than one sip.
different value criteria. Kind of not to bring it back to the Camuto conversation, but it just kind of it reminded me of something. So Yukino Bosha up in Akita, right? So those guys could make beautiful sake. And it was interesting this year. I took part in what they call the Sake Professional College. And it's owned by Asahi. Yeah, it's a sake wholesaler shop over here in West Tokyo, and they bring several hundred industry professionals, mostly brewers, but others some journalists or food people or whatever, to come, and they go through and they taste by category and they rank everything. And the idea is to sort of spec out what the people at the forefront of the industry are, how they're evaluating the sake that's on the market right now. And what was really interesting, so you have different categories. You have Jumai, you got Ginjo, and then you have like Kimoto and Yamahai and stuff in a different category. And for those who know, Yukino Bosha makes Yamahai. They're known for making their Yamahai. And not only did they win the category, they won Best in Show as well. And what was interesting, and they even noted when they made the award, is he's mentioned a lot of people say that our Yamahai doesn't really taste like a Yamahai.
And it doesn't.
It doesn't. It
When
doesn't.
I say one, if it didn't tell you it was Yamaha in the bottle, you would even know.
You would
That's the
never
first one I
know.
think of.
You would never know. And so it's kind of an interesting example of that sort of, it's not directly related to that competition that you were talking about, but that level of sort of craft and refinement and ability to just really drill down and create a product at that level, while at the same time it was sort of also sort of reflecting sort of the trends that we were just talking about as well too. So where are we at? Where are we? What do we got?
So we've bounced off a bunch of us.
Bounced on
yeah.
a few
Yeah.
of these. One thing I was going to share. So Kokuryu
Right.
held a sake auction this year. It was the first time that has ever happened this is very, very common in the wine world to be auctioning off, you know, vintages a lot of times prior to what they know it's going to turn into. In this case, it was a little bit different in that this has been, no pun intended, this has been brewing for a while. Clearly, right? They developed an original label, the Mooney label, that and they collected their 2012 to 2015 vintages, stored them at minus temperature. They're all, you know, Tojo region of Hyogo, Yamada Nishiki, 35%, essentially all the same spec. And they brought this out to an auction, invited a whole bunch of buyers, restaurant folk, sommelier folk to come out and bid on all this stuff. And all of it sold through and then some. And they got more than the price they were expecting. And so this was sort of the testing ground for, is this something that the sake market is ready for? And following this, I've already talked to a number of brewers and or organizations involved with brewers that are going, yeah, we think we might want to do something along these lines. And it's something that's absolutely worth exploring. And I think you're going to start seeing, not to get in predictions, but I think
what price levels did they hit?
I haven't seen the numbers. I'm curious. What I've heard is that the system they had in place is essentially they would have to put down, you know, a number of cases they want and at what price or whatever. And depending on the demand, depending on how those numbers balanced out, it would go up to the next rank or the next rank, the next price category. Apparently it broke through all the barriers and they had to do another round on, I think, just about all of them. So we'll see. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see. I think it's something we're going to start seeing a whole lot more of.
I'm actually going to Kokuryu the day after tomorrow.
Oh, nice.
Had nothing to do with this.
Nice.
You're not the buyer.
Nice. Nice. Well, you can go get some details and bring them back.
I won't be tasting none of that.
Possibly not, but you can get some inside scoop and bring it back to us for a future.
So
episode.
It would be good if other breweries can do that, because it'll definitely raise the overall value image of sake. So hopefully other brewers can start to do that or something similar.
And that's probably another thing for this year.
Yeah, I think there's something I saw a lot this year. Was that just the premiumization out the wazoo for sake. I mean, even the largest brewers have come out with extremely expensive sake. I've seen brewers that I'd never heard of before coming out with extremely expensive sake. And other brewers I know coming out with extremely expensive products. I think this is actually very good. Just the fact that those products are out there that they'll sell will raise the overall image of sake, I think. I'll probably be drinking stuff significantly less expensive.
What kind of prices are we talking about in terms of premium pricing?
Well, the ones I've seen, I mean, you're talking, 100,000 sweet, but $1,000
plus.
$1,000 plus.
$1,000.
Christ.
Yeah.
plus.
Well, it's interesting. So you're kind of what's funny. So what kind of you're just mentioning is you might be drinking a little bit less expensive stuff regularly. So that I think it's important for a lot of people to understand is that you can get a whole lot of really, really great sake in Japan for the equivalent of about $15 to $20. It's not hard. There's a lot of access to some of that stuff. So actually justifying or convincing people to buy something more than 2,000 yen, you're already getting into a relatively premium price point for a lot of people here in Japan. And we're talking about here in Japan. People overseas are used to, paying $30, $40, $50 a bottle just because of the nature of the thing. But in Japan, it hasn't really developed out yet. So when we're talking about premium, you're starting to see that really high end premium. We're looking at people selling bottles of, for $1,000, $1,500, $2,000, but at the same time trying to build out ranges, price points between that, say $20 to $100, something at that $30 price point, that $50 to $60, $70 price point, that right around $100 price point. Trying getting those layers as well.
Yeah.
I actually think there's plenty of those out there.
They're out there.
30, 40, 50, 60, up to 120 or so.
Yeah.
They're out there.
Once you get above that, that's where we've got a dearth of higher price sake, I think.
Yeah. And there is absolutely, because there really doesn't exist a whole lot above that $100. But I think a lot of that stuff between the $20 to $100 range doesn't sell a lot. A lot of it tends to be gift sake. It's not something that necessarily has a place on the market. Even when you go to a lot of these Michelin restaurants and places like that, a lot of them are serving sake that is $15 to $20 a bottle. Sure. And it's because the sake is incredible. It's really, really great. And so the market's trying to figure out how do we justify this value and how do we communicate that at these other different price points. And so when you're talking about these breweries that you've never even heard of that all of a sudden have really high price point sakes, everybody's trying to figure out how to justify that price point and who's gonna bite. And so it's kind of the Wild West right now.
Actually, I think that's the decision to put such a product on the market is not the brewer's decision only. It has been done with the support of the retailers. And because without the support of the retailers, it would probably fail. And actually, these very expensive sakes you can buy. So you can see them in the fridges of some of the retailers.
That's right.
In Tokyo, I'm thinking of Hasegawa, of course.
Yeah,
Sake
it's a
ten.
great example.
And it's really, Hasegawa sounds philosophy, motivation that made it possible.
And actually, the problem with these very highly priced sake, and I'm already kind of hearing this not just from a Japanese contingent, but also foreign customers as well, who you would think would probably embrace these sake, right? They do see them sometimes as a little bit of a gimmick, because the thing about brewing is that it's very hard to actually squeeze another, a kind of quality out of it that's worth that much money. And the problem here is the problem that we always had when we've always wanted to increase the price of sake, but the problem that we've always had is that brewing is just already really, really high quality. Already a lot of work is going into every single bottle, whether it be Futsushu or, Jinmaishu or whatever, cup sake even, and so to actually raise that profile, to get to a point where you can actually ask people to pay these prices, understanding that the sort of quality and the benefits that they're getting from that, I think we're still a long way off. There are a lot of these very highly priced sake. I mean, it is really a gimmick behind the reason why they're charging these higher prices. The ones that I know of are making these for the overseas market primarily, because there are customers in some East Asian countries that just ask for the most expensive thing that you can possibly serve them.
I think it ties up nicely with the private label story. It's kind of the same. There is a market for that, and overseas is an important part of it.
And that's actually one I kind of wanted to dig into with you guys a little bit here. And so this idea of creating a private label, right? Each brewer tends to have a number of different labels in their portfolio. A lot of them are difficult to decipher, even for people who live here and speak the language. That is the reality. It's no secret that marketing communication has not been the industry's forte. And so how to resolve that has become a huge theme, not just in the past year, but the last couple of years. And it is starting to see a lot of people take a crack at that. Especially really in this last year, I started to see not just a lot of independent individual private labels. You'll see a lot of, say, collaboration products where, let's say, this person or this company teams up with a brewery to make a specific sake on a certain label. What you're starting to see a lot more now are entities that were not involved with sake, but see infinite potential for creating a product at these different price points if they can develop better communication and things like that. Because a lot of breweries don't necessarily have those resources, to have somebody come in from the outside and say, hey, look, I am more than happy to buy X amount of volume at X reasonable price. Can you make this for me? That's a nice proposition for a lot of breweries. So in the short term, very, very helpful. The one thing that has me personally a little bit concerned, and I've been kind of thinking about this, and I'm curious as to what you guys think, is that in the short term, it's very good. It's clearly helping everyone. You're getting a lot of great products on the market. And you're getting a lot of beautiful products on the market, which, for better or worse, it's important. These things communicate to people. Does it look nice when it's sitting on the shelf, and does it make people want to, take a crack at it? This has been happening. The part that has been concerning me, however, is that these labels, what they end up doing is they end up collaborating with a lot of different breweries all around Japan, right? And so they have a consistent label with each individual product made by a completely different brewery, right? And maybe it's color-coded, or it has a different name, or it has some sort of, it's a season, or it's a shape, or it's something to signify that these are a different product, right, on the label. The brewery, as a consumer, the brewery isn't really at the forefront of that product. And most of them that I have seen, if you look at the small print, 98% of the times, yes, it says it on there. But I also see a lot where you'd struggle to find it. And even a lot of the communications and stuff on web and things like that, that's not the prominent part of the communication. It's this brand, which in and of itself isn't a bad thing, right? I love that you're getting new players into the market, investing, seeing potential, seeing possibility, creating opportunities for passionate brewers who make great products. This is all a good thing. The one thing that concerns me, however, is that in the long term, where does that leave the individual brewers? I feel like it puts them in a position that's not so different from where they were now with a lot of the wholesalers when they weren't really in control of their own destiny. Whereas all of a sudden, right, it's these other companies, they're sort of at the whims of the demands of these certain companies. If they succeed, great, they can keep selling that individual product. But how many of those different products can they make for how many different people? And
Can I jump
how
in
much
here?
is that
Because I work for a company that basically, right from the beginning, their entire concept has been about making original products with the brewers. And they kind of run a chain of kind of all-you-can-taste bars, and I don't know where people sit about that, but they all-you-can-taste bars in Tokyo. And even before they opened those bars, they started off with kind of like a membership service where you pay a certain amount every month, and then they send you a new sake every month that's made together with the brewer. And one thing I see, and when I first heard about this concept, I kind of had the same concern as you. It's just kind of like a private brand or someone trying to hijack, or kind of piggyback off a brewer here. They do all the work, and then the brand takes all the glory at the end. But I can tell you with 100% confidence that this particular company goes out of their way to put the brewer at the forefront. Every single product allows that brewer to tell their story. And actually, the brewers come up with the idea behind these products. But basically what the company does is they go to them, they go and have a meeting, and they say, is there a product you've always wanted to make? Make it. As long as it's got a story, we'll buy it, we'll sell it, and we'll buy it, 1 tank or whatever. And they do this every month, and they encourage the brewer to go out of their way to kind of live their dream, if you like. Because every brewer's got a sake that they've always wanted to make, a story that they've always wanted to tell. I think probably this is the best example out there of how this kind of original label thing is actually working really well. Chris, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's just, I do see a lot of these other cases where I don't even know who made the original sake. I mean, I know the brand behind it, but I can't see the brewer anywhere, and on there.
Yeah. And so I said, inherently, I don't think it's a bad thing at all.
No.
And a lot of the people, as you're saying, are in it for the best reasons because
Yeah.
they really do love it. They really do care. And I've met so many people who are so passionate, who are working so damn hard to create something really special. And really, it's amazing the work they're doing. Like I said, inherently, it's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
I feel I've seen so much expansion of this business model so fast
I agree.
with so much product that as a consumer, even when you're talking about story, at the end of the day, most of the consumers, they're just looking at what's on the shelf and can they
The
remember
story
what's
has got to be about the brewer. And that's what I'm saying. This company does really well. Is the story has got to be about the brewer. Let the brewer tell their story. It's something that they can't really do with their regular products. To be fair, every single product they sell, they've got to make it clear to the consumer what they're getting, like flavor or whatever. And there's got to be kind of like a concept behind it. But with these original products, it can just be about them. Something in their history is something that they want to promote. And I think actually in that respect, these original that's what these original products should do.
Ideally.
Yeah, ideally.
Yep.
If anyone's listening and they want to create an original product, can you please just do that? Just find out the brewery story and use this product to give them an opportunity to...
The company you're speaking of is doing a great job, but nobody else is doing that.
No, I agree. No one else is doing that.
What they do is they say, look, we want a product from 1,200 yen to 1,400 yen, and this and this and this, and we'll figure out the story later.
Right.
You can cut that out too. I'll leave that up to you.
We
Actually, I'm not afraid to
we
stand
maybe
behind
need
this.
No, it's okay. I think that's important.
Control.
The reality is that it runs the gamut, right, of the
It
spectrum,
does.
and it's getting a little bit chaotic.
It
And I think as a
is.
consumer, I think it's
I
going to
agree.
be.
There's too many labels
And actually,
out there.
I wrote this. What to look forward to a prediction for 2019 is chaos with this kind of a thing, and it's going to shake out. You're going to get too many PBs, and it's going to shake out. I mean, here's what I think: if somebody drinks a sake that's a private brand and they learn to like sake because of it, that's a good thing. But the more they learn about sake, the more they're going to want to get in touch with the brewer. Who made this? What's different about it, right? And they're going to actually move away from the very product that got them into it.
When I was working for a brewery, I mean, one of our jobs was actually going out and go to these restaurants that were buying personal brands from us, and it was always the same conversation. We can't have this on the label. We can't have that on the label. It doesn't allow us as our restaurant to actually promote our brand. It was always the same thing. And then when in the end, you'd end up with just another product on their menu. Most people didn't have a clue who was making it or where it came from.
Do you see this in shochu, Wendy, stuff like that? Is this a trend that you're starting to see pop up, or is it?
The PB thing, we're a couple decades behind sake, obviously, just because there's not the amount of information and knowledge and experience overseas yet. But there are a lot of companies coming into town saying, hey, we know this is coming. We want to be first. We want to be at the front of that wave. And we want to have our own brands ready to go. And then you've got, You've got folks, really, really important mixologists such as Shingo Gokan, which I'm sure you've heard his name before. And he just opened a new place in Shibuya. And he's got places in Shanghai. He's a world-renowned mixologist. And he's going out there to find his own personal brands of different types of shochu that he is using in his cocktails. It's a thing, and it's growing, and it'll be bigger and bigger. So yeah, in that sense, shochu is following right in the footsteps of sake.
I want to keep some of the positive about it when the other partner is bringing something to the table as well, and when he or when the company comes from a different world, like the world of wine, for example, or whiskey, because that was an example I was taking.
You brought up earlier, yeah, absolutely.
And what I find interesting is how subtly the story changes or sake changes as a product. We are not buying a story anymore, or maybe the story of the brand that itself, but it kind of brings sake into a sort of an Epicurean world where people would appreciate it only for what it is, without having or without necessarily knowing or needing to know the whole story behind the way the product was done.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a big challenge, probably not just for sake, but going forward. There's a lot of stories out there these days.
Yeah, so well, it's all about the story,
right?
Isn't it? Yeah.
But then again, being able to put something out there that people can just take in and take on its own terms, you know, and just really.
It does make it more accessible overseas, though. There's no doubt about that. When you've got a story, you know, when you're trying to sell it,
for
sure. When you can't read the label, you know, and if you the great thing about these original labels is they can kind of do things which the regular line doesn't do, which is put English on the label, or make it a little bit more accessible for overseas visitors.
As I said, this stuff inherently it's not bad. But I think it's as a model, it's still being hashed out. And the long-term effects, I think we might not see for a little while, actually, depending on how far this goes.
The chaos is coming.
Yeah, there's going to be a shakeout. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody and their brother is going to have a private brand, and then I think people are going to go beyond that and to want to know more about the producer, the terroir, what's going into this, which is when those brands will get seen through. Yeah. It's got its, I'm just saying that too much of a good thing is.
Can I just ask Sebastien?
Too much.
I don't know if you don't know, but if you know whether wine ever had any problem with this.
Actually, I was thinking about it. I mean, I wanted to ask you the same question.
Yeah.
I mean, you recently got your.
I recently became an official advanced wine but no, I read the book and I already forgot it. Nothing comes up in the book about that, actually. I'm aware there are a lot of original wine labels out there, but no, I have no idea.
Didn't the negociant system do just that?
Well, the negociant system does that, yeah. You buy the grapes and you're allowed to kind of make your own wine. Right. So the wine inherently kind of has that, personal brand system to begin with. But you do have this other personal brand system where people come from outside and they kind of, hire a winery or something to make a wine for them, and they put the label on. One that comes straight to my mind is the Coppola series, the Francis Coppola series.
It might be more of a US phenomenon than a European phenomenon.
So with beer, I mean, it would be kind of like a McKellar kind of a thing, right? I mean, it's a little bit different is that he was a brewer who was going around working with different breweries to develop original products, but nobody knows really where that came from. They know McKellar is a brand, and I guess I'm trying to think of things that relate in the beer world. Maybe I said you saw a lot of collaboration beers for a while that were sometimes hard to interpret, exactly where they came from, but the idea was to leverage the power of both.
Right.
And then the whiskey world in the States, you had all of these small craft whiskeys for a while, and they were being made by the same 14 distilleries essentially, and then repackaged.
Vodka's the same way.
Yeah. So there's I think what John is saying with the chaos and people wanting to, we're talking about authenticity before. I mean, the real authenticity is like, do you know where this is made?
Right.
Are we really being true to the locale, the people, the spirit of those drinks? And that's a very valid point. I think the chaos is coming, and it may play out over the next few years. A weird corollary in the shochu world and the awamori world right now is that these makers are starting to make other types of spirits. And, they're coming out, boom, boom, boom. You've seen all the gin that's come out in the last 2 years, right? Kyoya Shuzo just came out with Hinata, which is their second gin, very fruit-forward, citrus-forward. Awamori makers are cask aging everything they can get their hands on. There's a ton of stuff coming. You know, Hombo Shuzo has their Mars brand of whiskey, and it's really interesting for me to watch all of this playing out. And yeah, some of it is, you know, Kyoya makes a Imo Joju based gin, which to me is fascinating, and it's really good, or it's very interesting. But then it's also, okay, that's a great vehicle for shochu, but then at the same time, how far are we dragging ourselves away from the authenticity of the actual products that are made at that place? And I think it'll all come to a head. The brands, the companies, the investors that are being the most honest with their consumers are the ones that are going to make it through the shakeout. And then the ones who are being a little bit coy with stuff, they're going to get nailed, I think.
Right. So how do you empower the brewers? And I think there's a number of different, you know, interpretations of that right now.
Well, I think the brand label should be on the back. The brand name should only be allowed to be on the back. It shouldn't be allowed to be on the front label, as a rule. I think they probably need to set that law in Japan sooner rather than later. If you're making a personal brand, the brand that makes collaborates with the brewery should be on the back. The brewery goes on the front as a rule type thing.
I'm pretty sure legally the brewery name and address has to be on the label.
And well, it has to be out there, but that's the back label, isn't it? Right?
It's just someone label, but back or front, I mean.
Well, no, what I'm saying, the brewery should be the first thing you see when you pick up that bottle.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, not the brand that collaborates with the brewery.
That would be a tough proposition.
Of course it would. Of course it would. But then it's not a marketing tool anymore. It's because you generally want to give that brewery a chance to kind of produce something, and you help them with that. And personally, I'm a little bit naive. Maybe I thought that was maybe the original.
And I think that was the intent. But it's anyway. On that note, as long as we're kind of talking about the future, how about
2019.
2019. What's coming up this year? Anything exciting? Anything that's got anyone excited? Any wild predictions that we can look back on in a year and
Actually,
either laugh at ourselves or?
That got me thinking about something that I hadn't thought of speaking about today, and it's probably a bigger topic for another day. But there's a handful of breweries now that are taking their own junmaishu and distilling it and using that as the alcohol they add back for out of 10. So the company Mershon, which is owned by a big company, by a bigger company.
By Kirin, I think, isn't it?
I don't think so.
No?
But I could be wrong. It doesn't matter. They're selling alcohol to the brewers, but they've started making alcohol that's specified for adding to non-junmai sake. Yeah. And it started from Yamada Nishiki. Now, what's cool about this, whether or not they use Yamada Nishiki, and they probably shouldn't, and if this continues in the long run, I'm sure they won't, but you can take the cheapest rice in Japan, make sake from that, distill that, or just make shochu from it, doesn't matter. And now you've got pure ethyl alcohol that you can add to your non-junmai sake, but it's all traceable, right? You can tell exactly where that rice came from. Furthermore, every drop of alcohol in that bottle came from Japan.
And it's a really smart, and it supports rice farmers.
It supports rice farmers.
And it's a really smart way of using a lot of times what they call like kuzumai or these other, this rice that doesn't, that gets, shuffled away for other purposes, not for table rice, but for using made in other products or whatever. It's something where you can maybe develop a higher price point or something like that.
The problem is, though, it's not going to be cheap, or not as cheap as regular Aruten sake. So to me, from here on, whether we will see more about it this next year or in subsequent years, I've got high expectations for that. I think it's going to be a really cool sector of the market if it develops properly.
I think it's really exciting.
I'll pay for that.
Right, I think it's really smart. It was an interesting approach to that. So I was visiting Nida Honke up in Fukushima the other day. They don't do any Aruten sake; they're all junmai. But one thing that they do is they really try to find ways to use the rice of local farmers, and they do that to make other fermented food products and sweets. They have something called koji choco, where it's made solely from koji rice. It doesn't taste like chocolate, but it's delicious. It's a great snack. They make fermented drinks and amazakes and things. And what's fun is they call it their ekomai or eco rice. A lot of other breweries, they refer to this stuff as like, which it doesn't sound good. It's the leftovers. It's stuff you're throwing away. But in reality, what it is, it's ecological. It's a smart ecological way of using rice that normally wouldn't be purposed for higher end products or things like that. By changing the communication around that, especially in an era of sustainability and things like that, by just tweaking the communication around that a little bit, getting back to those premium sakes and those different price points and things like that, all of a sudden, in place right now where Aruten is sort of hovering in a bit of a difficult spot in the market right now, all of a sudden you could turn that around and turn that into something
that's
really
assuming
positive.
The people that are overly pro-junmai or against Aruten will buy into that. They should, but you don't know.
I'd like to think so.
A lot of the
right
reasons they
marketing,
give.
just the right marketing. Just there's various stigma around that.
Right, and not all that stigma has to do with the fact that
No.
the original, that the added alcohol was from sugarcane or anything like that.
Right.
Just they might
We
not
have
like
that
anything
episode
that
coming
comes
down the pipe here
Oh,
too.
we do,
We
yeah.
do.
Yeah,
That was a
right.
good one.
Yeah.
It's not out yet.
Well,
Cool.
we talk about this in that episode, but it's really an important move because Japan is suffering from, believe it or not, a drop in rice consumption, and it's been going on for a while now, and it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse. A lot of farmers going out of business, and this could be brewing. Often we say brewing could possibly help this industry, survive.
Sure it could.
A lot of rice farmers are looking to sake breweries right now.
They are.
Well, another thing coming up in 2019 that I'm quite excited about is finally the actual interest in shochu and awamori is, and I'm sure you've seen it too. There's a lot of people asking questions, and in 2018 there was so much, and there's actually a lot of fact-finding missions coming over all the time from all over the world. So I'm really excited about in 2019, and of course even more so in 2020. But we're going to see a lot more shochu leaving the country, awamori leaving the country, and not just leaving the country, but being pushed and being sold by people who actually care about these categories, which is a very new thing. You just had people kind of going through the motions, having it on the menu just in case, or having it on their website, but nobody knew how to talk about it. Nobody cared about it. And that's starting to change. I'm excited about that in 2019.
It's probably only a matter of time. It's going to happen like overnight. It
It's
feels like it's forever, but
gonna
we're probably
boom.
we're gonna go to sleep and we're gonna wake up one day and go,
All of a sudden, enough things are going to kind of fall into place.
Yeah.
And it'll be on the map. So I'm
Map-
excited
map it
about
out
that.
for 2019.
Yes.
Another thing, and here's my wild theory, okay? And I think we may finally move away from this obsession for really, really like premium, using this word premium as well, premium sake. I think we're about to move away from that. I'm looking in particular, I think, at the polishing, the rice polishing. I think we're finally going to move away from this obsession for like high rice polishing, going down to like silly levels, of rice polishing. I've already seen a lot of breweries now starting to step away and, make sake at sort of polish the rice less at higher polishing ratios. So I'm talking like 70 or 80% or whatever.
yeah. I think what you're going to see isn't so much a reduction in premium, but you're going to see shifts in that. It's
Yeah.
they're going to
The demand.
They're going to try to come up with other ways to define premium.
Yes.
So it's actually by not polishing rice, we're actually preserving
Right.
more of the rice and more of the flavor. More, there's a lot of different ways you can
Yeah.
spin it. There are a lot of different
I mean,
interpretations
I
of it. We're using
personally-
organic rice to do this. We're polishing less.
Right.
We're using a traditional method. So
Right.
because we ticked all these boxes and it's been matured for X amount of time and it's this vintage, we've ticked all these other boxes. So now that Daiginjo that was 5,000 yen, now this 80% milled, Junmai Kimoto from 2015 is 5,000 yen.
The biggest barrier for this is the special designation sake system that they have in place. Until they do something about that, it's not going to change overnight.
That's a good observation.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
other words, they've kind of locked into place with the concept of premium and non-premium.
Yeah.
goods.
Exactly.
And it's not really very fair.
Yeah, it's the thing, but that's
It's fair, but it's not good.
it's
for-
not necessarily representative
Right.
right now. And but when you think about it, I can't remember if we talked about this a little bit on another recording, but that's actually pretty recent though too,
Yes, it is.
right?
Yeah.
When it became
As a
law, it was
system.
Heisei Ganden.
19...
Right?
90
So-
90
Right, so we're
yeah.
looking at
When it
30 years
became
ago.
law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're looking at 30 years, which in the scheme of things is very recent. And there were other systems before, which means that it's not impossible that it couldn't change.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right? And like it said, that is a really good observation because it's difficult because if you're looking at, say, something like adding value to like Kimoto, that's one axis of, you're talking about the starter. That's pretty intense stuff. Then you're looking at polishing. That's something completely different.
Yeah.
Then you're talking about Junmai, not Junmai. You're talking about three completely different things that you're all trying to put on the same grid
Yeah. It's
that
confusing.
really don't belong on the
It's
same
confusing.
thing.
When you want to teach sake
You
to
know?
someone who doesn't know anything about sake, especially to overseas audiences, the first thing you've got to get around is this, special designation sake thing. And if we didn't have it, it would just make life so much easier. Before that, we had kind of a system which was all about the taxation, right? And this was, and the quality of the sake wasn't very transparent. And this was all about making the sake more transparent. But if you speak to the brewers, they don't feel that way. And like a lot of brewers I've spoken to are really on board for a change. If you just start this conversation, their eyes light up.
Yeah, it's just, it limits the range of motion in every conceivable. It's like a crotch hook in golf, keep your head down, but it's not the be all and end all. It doesn't solve all the problems.
And so kind of along the lines of that and sort of figuring out sort of add value to things like that and sort of how to define those things. I think another thing you're going to start to see is more places striving for a geographical indication. I think that that's going to be another way that people are trying to communicate value, and associate, again, back to the story, back to the region. As of right now, Yamagata is the only prefecture that has it on a large scale. There are a couple of shochu, aomori.
There's 4. How many places have one in the works? Do you have
for
any?
sake related?
Yeah, sake related.
In the works, I don't know. I've heard of a few different places that are pursuing it to a couple different degrees. I don't know how many in the works. I think what you're going to see. So one thing that happened this past year that was really interesting is you had it's not sake, but it's with miso actually. So there's this traditional style of miso called hacho miso, which is made in Aichi. And one thing that happened this year is the place of origin of hacho miso is in the town of Hacho in Okazaki. And there are two producers of that have just been the flag bearers for traditional craft in that for hundreds of years. As a prefecture, what they ended up doing is they ended up laxing the definition of that a great deal, the point to where everything that essentially they've protected up till now is pretty much meaningless. And now everywhere in the prefecture can make it under different temperature controls environments, and basically anything that all the restrictions that would have tied it to the region were basically nullified. And it basically puts them in a very difficult situation where you're going to have lots of places making all kinds of product that is not necessarily representative. So it becomes a challenge of where you draw that line. But it was generally viewed as a very weak definition of that, and essentially hurt the producers that have been the forebearers of really keeping that craft alive. Not to the same degree, but speaking with a lot of sake producers in Yamagata, a lot of them are proud of the GI. A lot of them are happy that it's there, but it seems the general consensus is that a lot of them aren't necessarily satisfied with the degree to which how strict it is.
Yeah.
When you look at, as far as flavor profile, it emphasizes clarity. Oh, you mean sake?
Yeah, that's the challenge with this, I think, is because many prefectures have no style of sake consistent across the prefectures, and even those that do, you have variations.
You do.
So if it's
the industry has kind of killed it.
Regionality is way too diluted.
Yeah, it's way too diluted.
It really is. And so it's going to be a big challenge.
The other problem is as well, for such a long time, for too long now, everyone has been using the same rice varieties. And now for GI to work, you have to actually lock this down and say you can only use these particular varieties in this prefecture. And there's going to be a lot of breweries.
On top of that,
it won't work.
If you look at the nature of the raw materials, though, it's a grain. You can ship it, just like with beer. It's not a perishable grain.
Right.
So the same things don't apply.
Exactly.
It's going to
be
that restriction there just for the purpose of having a GI. Right?
Yeah.
Expect more debate on that topic in the coming year.
I think the good thing about GI, though, is it's attracting more attention to the sake world.
It does.
And there's no such thing as bad PR.
It is. And it has, and there's tons of potential for it. And there's tons of potential for it. It really does have potential a lot. Anything else? Any last things anybody wants to stick in there?
Yeah, we are trying at Sake on Air to bring sake to the rest of the world.
Yes.
But 19 and 20 are 2 years where the world is coming to us. So
this is true.
That's very
This
exciting.
is very true. Yeah.
Rugby World Cup and of course Olympic Games in 2020. But we'll speak about that next year. So this is an exciting time as well, an opportunity, I think, to showcase Nihonshu and do a little bit of education about the product.
Absolutely.
So looking forward to that.
I think there's going to be a lot of people dipping their toes into
and
what
shochu,
with
actually.
That. And shochu as well too, right? There's going to be matches down there on Kyushu.
There will be,
right?
Yep.
That's one thing that's going to be kind of different from the Olympics too, right? Especially this year with rugby.
It's going to be spread out.
It's spread out. It's all over the place, and so you're going to get people here for a long period of time that are traveling to different.
I was just jostling for tickets in Kumamoto. So
nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Do we know if sake has anything going for rugby, like any kind of special original brand or a series of?
Well, there's the all black sake. Who made the all black sake? I can't remember.
That's the guy in New Zealand.
Zenko.
Oh yeah, that was Zenko, right?
Zenkuro.
Finished working for
Zenko. Yeah. Well, that's the brand name, isn't it? Behind the sake.
All black. Obviously, you took it from.
There's another one in Japan too.
Called
There's it's in Tochigi. What's the brewer? There's a brewer in Tochigi in Imaichi that made an all black sake.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
It's
Katayama.
I'll remember. Katayama,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Oh, I've been there.
Yeah.
I know the brewer.
Yeah, they did one too. It looks.
I didn't know about
it looks very official.
Yeah,
it's very official.
It resonates with awamori for me.
Yeah. Certainly, all black. Yeah.
Yeah, Koji.
Yep.
Very good.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
right. They're missing an opportunity right there. I hope they're listening
That's
to
a
this.
good point, yeah.
You can start your original label right now,
There
Chris.
we go.
You're on
I'm
it.
going to be on the phone as soon as we're done with this.
So with that, we crammed 2018 and our vision for 2019 into an hour plus or minus. There's probably a lot more to dig into, but I think that'll suffice for one evening.
It's going to have to.
It's going to have to at
Yeah.
this point in time. Gentlemen, thank you so much
Thank you
for
guys very
your
much.
time.
Thank
you.
Yeah,
Thank
this
you
has
very
been
much. Always an honor.
another fine session. This is a lot of fun having everybody in the same room. We
Great.
really ought to do this more.
Yeah.
This is really good. We would love everybody's feedback, anybody's thoughts, opinions, feelings about this show, anything we said. We would love to hear. You can send us questions at questions@sakeonair or reach us at any of your favorite social media platforms at Sake On Air. We're pretty easy to track down. There aren't too many Sake On Airs out there, so if you Google us. As always, this has been brought to you thanks to the wonderful support of the Japan Sake and Shochu Makers Association and broadcast from the Japan Sake and Shochu Information Center. A big thank you to Frank for making this sound beautiful.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, sir.
Frank.
And Mr. Shuso Imada, who's always hovering as the voice of reason. We're going to find a way to squeeze him on here a little bit more in 2019. We're working on it. So with that, gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you in a couple weeks.